So most people, I think, when they hear about the Stalin Constitution of 1936, I think they act pretty dismissively and pretty much consider it just a sham and not really worth kind of thinking about or let alone studying it. So I wanted to start by just asking you, what do you find in the Constitution that's worth studying, that's worth understanding?
Well, I actually came to the project the same way you just talked about. My first thought was Stalin Constitution. This seems counterintuitive, so let's have a look. But I think that there's a lot more to the Constitution than people think, and I do believe that the Soviet Union was more serious about its democratizing and participatory aspects than other people really think about. Stalin spent a whole chunk of an April going through three different versions of the draft constitution, making personal changes, spending a lot of effort. People from the Central Committee consistently sent angry letters to the provinces telling them that they were not recording enough suggestions, that they weren't sending them fast enough, or they were doing it in too much of a campaign like function. So I think they genuinely wanted to know what people thought, and that they genuinely thought that they could open up the Soviet Union a little bit, within reason. There was no idea of other parties, for example, but to have multiple candidates for an election, I think was something that the central leadership was very much in favor of.
It's fascinating because you have them writing this draft constitution, and one of the things you point out too, they're also looking at constitutions from all over the world, particularly from the West, and then they do this what I think is a very strange thing, and that is they actually open up the draft for public discussion. So before we get into the mechanics of that public discussion, want to talk about the role of mass participation or participation from the population within the Stalinist system.
Well, and I think that's something people always get wrong. They think of this as a totalitarian state in which nobody can participate. The Stalinist state is absolutely not totalitarian. They simply don't have the mechanisms or the people to be totalitarian over such a large territory. It's just physically impossible. But also, they really want to hear from the people. Getting popular participation involved in a lot of projects is how they get things done. That's how they get things like the 5-year plan done. That's how they get collectivization done. They pull people in from the cities, what are they, the 25,000ers, they pull in as volunteers. So getting people to participate in all of these state building tasks is something they've done for a long time. So it's really not aberrant in any way.
And why do they want people to participate in the, talk about and discuss the Constitution?
In part, I think they would like people to feel vested in the system. Also, they need information about what is going on in the provinces, and this is one of the ways to get it. In many ways, newspapers, complaints, and people's voices are the way that the government knows what is going on outside of Moscow. They don't necessarily trust the regional officials or the local officials, and I've seen some of the reports. Some of them are really quite inaccurate. And it's unclear if that's simply because they wanted to lie to their bosses or if these men simply lack the tools and education to create an accurate report. My guess is both.
Yeah, and I would also probably add that the local institutions themselves weren't really, in terms of governance, to really know what's going on in parts of society. Would you say that, or is it something else?
Well, for example, I'm looking at new stuff on life after collectivization in Kirov. That's my new project, and I'm looking at certain districts and their level of control. I'm looking at, for example, Sanchorsky district, which is massive, and it has 69 communists and 189 Komsomol members trying to, govern an entire district, and their main means of transportation is the bicycle, which means that, 6 months out of the year, they don't go anywhere. And of course, that their efforts are, best concentrated in areas closest to the capital because those are the ones they can reach. Districts far away, they simply don't have much influence on.
Well, this comes to the other issue, and the need for popular participation as one of the ways in which the center can understand what's going on in the periphery. So what does the Soviet system, you focus on the province of Kirov. So what does the Soviet system look like from Kirov?
Not a whole lot. It does really depend on where you live. People do not really realize the scope of Russia. The Kirov region currently is about the same land area as France. Yeah. And the road system was terrible. In some places, they simply don't have much in the way of roads. Transport is terrible. Phone connections are terrible. You have communists mainly in either district capitals or the capital city, but on a lot of collective farms, you don't have any real representation of the state at all.